Most people remember Kelly's Heroes as a light-hearted romp through World War II, tanks, gold bars, and misfits cracking jokes behind enemy lines. But the film almost looked nothing like that. Early versions told a much darker story, and tensions behind the scenes nearly derailed everything. This video reveals the production secrets, character reinventions, and hidden themes that change what the movie truly says about war, authority, and heroism. These aren't trivia facts. They're the details that reframe the entire film, and the transformation started before cameras ever rolled. Number 1. Almost a dark war movie. Long before the jokes and the gold heist, this film was heading in a completely different direction. Early drafts of the screenplay leaned heavily into traditional World War II realism, with gritty combat and serious dramatic stakes. The humor that defines the finished product wasn't part of the original vision. It was layered in gradually as the project evolved. That shift wasn't a safe commercial decision. It was a genuine creative gamble. What makes the final version so effective is that traces of that darker foundation still remain. Beneath the laughs, there's real tension and emotional weight that most war comedies never achieve. The characters aren't just clowns, they're tired soldiers navigating chaos, and their cynicism feels earned. That balance between absurdity and authenticity didn't happen by accident. The tonal pivot could have backfired completely. Mixing comedy with combat was risky in 1970, especially when audiences expected either straight action or outright parody. But by keeping one foot in drama, the filmmakers created something that felt fresh and unpredictable. That gamble is exactly why the movie still resonates decades later. It refuses to be just one thing. Number 2. Eastwood nearly walked away. Before a single frame was shot, the production nearly lost its biggest star. Clint Eastwood grew increasingly frustrated during development, clashing with the creative team over how the story should feel. He wasn't opposed to humor, but he resisted anything that pushed the film too far into slapstick territory. For Eastwood, the balance between action and comedy had to feel grounded, not cartoonish. The disagreements centered on tone and pacing. Eastwood wanted a leaner, cooler movie that let tension breathe between laughs. Studio pressures and evolving script drafts kept pulling in other directions, and at several points, his commitment to the project wavered. Losing him would have been a disaster, not just for star power, but for the film's entire identity. In the end, Eastwood stayed, but the tension shaped his performance. His portrayal of Kelly feels deliberately restrained, almost detached from the chaos around him. That coolness wasn't accidental. It was Eastwood asserting control in the only way he could. The friction behind the scenes bled directly into the character audiences see on screen. Number 3. Oddball wasn't in the script. One of the most iconic characters in the film didn't exist when the project began. Early drafts made no mention of the eccentric tank commander who would eventually steal nearly every scene. Donald Sutherland's Oddball emerged gradually, shaped and expanded during production rather than planned from the start. What began as a minor role grew into something far more significant. The character's development happened almost organically. Sutherland brought an improvisational energy that the filmmakers recognized and encouraged. Lines were added, scenes were extended, and Oddball's quirky philosophy became central to the movie's tone. Without that willingness to adapt, the film would have lost one of its most distinctive voices. By the time shooting wrapped, Oddball had become the most quoted character in the entire picture. His offbeat one-liners and laid-back attitude captured something audiences hadn't seen in war films before. What's remarkable is that none of it was guaranteed. The character only exists because the production stayed flexible enough to let him grow. Number 4. A character studios feared. Studio executives weren't thrilled when they saw what Oddball was becoming. A hippie-inspired tank commander spouting peace and love philosophy in the middle of World War II didn't fit any conventional mold. Worried that audiences would be confused or alienated, higher-ups pushed back against the character's counterculture personality. At one point, significant cuts were seriously considered. The fear wasn't irrational. In 1970, blending wartime action with anti-establishment undertones was a genuine risk. Oddball didn't behave like a traditional military hero. He rejected aggression, quoted pseudo-philosophy, and seemed more interested in vibes than victory. For executives expecting a straightforward adventure, this felt dangerously off-brand. Ironically, the very qualities that worried the studio became the film's greatest strength. Audiences embraced Oddball precisely because he was unexpected. His presence gave the movie an edge that separated it from forgettable war pictures of the era. What looked like a liability turned into the element people remembered most, proof that creative risks sometimes pay off in ways nobody predicts. Number 5. The gold was a disguise. On the surface, the plot is simple. Soldiers go rogue to steal Nazi gold, but the heist was never really the point. Beneath that caper structure lies a story questioning obedience, military logic, and what heroism actually means. The gold functions as a narrative cover, a reason to move characters through situations that expose deeper contradictions. What the mission really does is strip away the usual war movie framework. These men aren't fighting for country or duty. They're acting on self-interest, and the film never punishes them for it. That choice quietly challenges the idea that following orders equals virtue. The protagonists succeed specifically because they ignore the system designed to control them. The result is a movie that feels subversive without ever preaching. Audiences laugh at the cons and cheer the payoff, but the underlying message lingers. Greed isn't the theme, freedom is. The gold just gave the filmmakers a shiny distraction while they slipped something more provocative underneath. Number 6. Real tanks, fake Germans. Authenticity mattered to the production team, but so did practicality. The film features real World War II-era tanks, but they weren't actual German vehicles. Instead, American and Yugoslav tanks were carefully modified to resemble German Tiger tanks. The visual trickery worked. Most audiences never noticed the difference, and the battlefield sequences gained a weight that props alone couldn't deliver. The modifications required clever engineering and camera work. Exterior plating was altered, markings were changed, and specific angles were favored to sell the illusion. What appeared on screen as fearsome Nazi armor was actually Allied machinery dressed up for the role. It was a deception designed entirely to serve realism, an irony the filmmakers likely appreciated. This approach gave the action scenes a tactile quality missing from many war films of the era. Real metal, real treads, and real dust created an atmosphere that model work couldn't replicate. The tanks weren't just background elements. They became characters in their own right. That commitment to physical authenticity helped ground the comedy in something audiences could feel viscerally. Number 7. Why it filmed in Yugoslavia. Choosing a filming location wasn't just about scenery. It was about freedom. Yugoslavia offered something Western European countries couldn't: access to military equipment, sprawling landscapes, and minimal bureaucratic interference. The production could stage massive battle sequences without the restrictions common on Hollywood-controlled sets. For a film this ambitious, that flexibility was essential. Cost played a role too, but it wasn't the only factor. The Yugoslav government welcomed foreign productions and provided resources that would have been prohibitively expensive elsewhere. Tanks, troops, and locations came together in ways that allowed the filmmakers to think bigger. Scenes that might have been scaled back in another country were realized at full scope. The location also shaped the movie's visual identity. Rolling hills, rustic villages, and open terrain gave the action an epic, almost operatic quality. Nothing felt confined or artificial. That sense of space reinforced the story's themes. Soldiers moving beyond boundaries, ignoring limits imposed by distant commanders. The geography became part of the narrative. Number 8. A surprisingly relaxed set. War films often come with stories of grueling shoots and on-set tension. This production defied that expectation. Despite large-scale stunts, pyrotechnics, and complex logistics, cast members consistently described the atmosphere as friendly and easygoing. The camaraderie audiences see on screen wasn't just acting. It reflected genuine relationships formed during filming. Part of that relaxed energy came from the ensemble dynamic. Eastwood, Sutherland, Savalas, and the supporting cast developed an easy rapport that translated directly into their performances. When characters joke and banter in the film, there's an unforced quality that stiff direction couldn't manufacture. The production allowed room for spontaneity, and actors took advantage. That atmosphere also influenced the final product's tone. A stressed, combative set often produces tension. Audiences can sense, even unconsciously. Here, the laid-back environment helped performances feel natural and lived in. What could have been a chaotic shoot became something closer to a working vacation, and the film is better for it. Number 9. Savalas played a Western. Not every actor approached the material as a war story. Telly Savalas made an unusual choice for his role as Big Joe. He performed the character like a frontier outlaw, rather than a military sergeant. His posture, line delivery, and attitude borrowed more from Western films than combat dramas. It was an unconventional decision that added unexpected texture to the ensemble. The Western influence showed in small details. Savalas carried himself with a gunslinger's swagger, treating chaos like an inconvenience rather than a crisis. His interactions felt less like military protocol and more like a poker game between rivals. That energy created friction with the more grounded performances around him, friction that made scenes more dynamic. What could have felt out of place instead enriched the group dynamic. Big Joe became a figure audiences couldn't quite categorize, which made him more interesting. Savalas understood that genre boundaries are flexible, and his instinct to borrow from another tradition gave the film a flavor nobody planned but everyone benefited from. Number 10. Explosions got too real. Action sequences in the film weren't just impressive, they were genuinely dangerous. Explosions were staged with margins that modern productions would never allow. Pyrotechnics detonated close to actors and crew, creating visceral moments that carried real risk. Safety standards have evolved dramatically since 1970, and watching the footage now makes that evolution obvious. The risks weren't taken carelessly. Filmmakers believed that proximity to real explosions produced reactions no acting could replicate. When characters flinch or scramble, there's an authenticity rooted in genuine adrenaline. That philosophy prioritized visual impact over caution, a trade-off that defined much of the era's stunt work. What's remarkable is how those dangerous conditions enhanced the film's playful tone. Scenes meant to be comedic still carry tension because the danger underneath was real. Audiences sensed something raw in the action, even during lighter moments. That blend of humor and hazard gives the movie an edge that safer productions simply can't replicate. Number 11. Comedy hid the message. Laughter can be a weapon, and this film knew exactly how to use it. The humor wasn't just entertainment, it was camouflage. Beneath the jokes lies pointed criticism of war's absurdity, wasted lives, and hollow authority. By making audiences laugh, the filmmakers smuggled in ideas that a straightforward drama might have delivered too bluntly or too obviously. The approach was strategic. Direct anti-war messaging in 1970 risked alienating mainstream viewers or attracting unwanted controversy. Comedy provided cover. Audiences could enjoy the heist, cheer the misfits, and absorb the subversion without feeling lectured. The film never stops to explain its themes. It trusts viewers to sense them underneath the entertainment without needing guidance. What emerges is something rare, a movie that critiques without preaching, the absurdity of military logic, the randomness of survival, the emptiness of official heroism. All of it lands softly because it arrives wrapped in wit. That protective layer of humor is why the message endures. Viewers who came for fun left with something more, whether they realized it or not. Number 12. Eastwood's quiet protest. Amid chaos and comedy, one performance stays remarkably still. Clint Eastwood plays Kelly with deliberate restraint, refusing to match the energy swirling around him. While other characters shout, joke, and scramble, Kelly observes, cool, detached, almost skeptical of the entire enterprise. That minimalism wasn't laziness or disinterest. It was a conscious artistic choice. The contrast works on multiple levels. Against louder personalities like Oddball and Big Joe, Kelly's silence becomes its own statement. He's not a cheerleader for the mission or the military structure around him. His subdued reactions suggest a man who sees through the absurdity but presses forward anyway. That quiet resistance defines his character more than any speech could. Eastwood's approach also reflects the tensions behind the scenes. Frustrated by creative disagreements, he channeled that energy into performance. Kelly's detachment mirrors Eastwood's own skepticism about the project's direction. What audiences interpret as cool confidence may actually be something closer to protest, an actor asserting control through stillness when words failed him elsewhere. Number 13. Bureaucracy is the real joke. Enemies with guns aren't the biggest obstacle in this story. Paperwork and procedure are. Throughout the film, military systems fail in ways both comic and pointed. Orders arrive late, get misunderstood, or simply make no sense at all. The chain of command exists, but it rarely helps anyone accomplish anything useful on the ground. The satire stays subtle. There are no speeches about institutional failure or heavy-handed scenes mocking generals. Instead, incompetence reveals itself naturally through small moments, delayed communications, confused officers, decisions made by people nowhere near the action. Authority becomes an obstacle rather than an asset, and the protagonists succeed by routing around it entirely. This quiet critique reframes who the real antagonist is. German soldiers pose physical threats, but bureaucracy poses existential ones. The system designed to support these men actively hinders them at every turn. By treating institutional dysfunction as a background noise rather than foreground drama, the film makes its point without ever slowing down to argue it. Number 14. Germans weren't caricatures. War films often reduce the enemy to cartoons, snarling villains without depth or humanity. This movie takes a different path. German officers appear calm, professional, and entirely rational. They're adversaries, but they're not monsters. That choice carries moral weight most audiences sense even if they don't consciously register it. The restraint was intentional. Making enemies human complicates the clean logic of wartime storytelling. If the other side isn't evil, then conflict becomes tragedy rather than triumph. The film doesn't dwell on this tension, but it doesn't ignore it either. German characters are allowed dignity that propaganda-style filmmaking would have denied them completely. This approach matters because it disrupts easy viewing. Audiences expecting to hate the enemy are instead asked to see professionals doing their jobs, not unlike the protagonists themselves. That moral ambiguity enriches the story considerably. Victory feels different when the defeated weren't demons. The film earns complexity by refusing the simplest path. Number 15. A victory without cheers. Most war films end with triumph. Flags waving, music swelling, heroes embraced by grateful crowds. This one refuses that formula. The conclusion is deliberately muted, almost anticlimactic. Characters get what they wanted, but there's no celebration, no rousing speech, no cathartic release. Success arrives quietly, and the film moves on without fanfare. The restraint reinforces everything that came before. A triumphant ending would have undermined the subtle critiques woven throughout the story. If victory felt glorious, the questions about authority and obedience would dissolve into feel-good resolution. By keeping the finale understated, the filmmakers preserved the movie's uncomfortable moral ambiguity intact. What audiences remember isn't a heroic climax, but a strange hollowness. Winning doesn't feel like winning. It just feels like surviving long enough to collect the reward. That emotional flatness is the point. The film suggests that even success within an absurd system remains somehow unsatisfying. Triumph and emptiness coexist, and neither cancels the other out. Number 16. The music breaks the era. Something unusual happens when the soundtrack kicks in. Instead of traditional orchestral scores typical of World War II films, the music blends military marches with contemporary rhythms that feel out of place, intentionally so. The anachronistic sound choices create subtle dissonance, pulling viewers out of period authenticity and into something more self-aware and modern. The effect is disorienting in the best way. War film scores usually reinforce nostalgia, wrapping combat in familiar emotional cues that tell audiences exactly how to feel. Here, the music refuses that role. Modern beats interrupt the 1940s setting, reminding viewers they're watching a construction rather than a documentary. That distance allows the satire underneath to breathe more freely. What might seem like a strange stylistic choice actually serves the film's larger goals. By breaking the era sonically, the filmmakers signal that this isn't a straightforward celebration of wartime heroism. The music becomes commentary, a quiet nudge suggesting that the story has more on its mind than explosions and gold bars. Audiences may not consciously notice, but the tone registers anyway. Number 17. Class conflict most missed. Beneath the heist and the humor runs a theme most viewers overlook entirely. The film quietly explores class tensions within military structure, officers debating rules from safety while enlisted men risk everything on the ground. That divide shapes character dynamics throughout, even when it's never explicitly addressed in dialogue or plot. The pattern repeats consistently. Those with rank worry about protocol, reputation, and credit. Those without rank worry about survival and reward. The protagonists succeed precisely because they ignore the hierarchy designed to keep them obedient. Their rebellion isn't political, it's practical. They recognize that the system serves those at the top, not those doing the actual work. This layer gives the story unexpected depth. What looks like a simple adventure is actually structured around who holds power and who doesn't. Officers become obstacles, enlisted men become problem solvers. The film never lectures about inequality, but the evidence accumulates scene by scene. By the end, viewers have absorbed a critique they might not even realize they received. Number 18. Oddball wasn't a joke. Easy laughs can obscure serious intent, and that's exactly what happened with this character. Donald Sutherland's Oddball delivers comedy throughout the film, but his pacifist philosophy isn't played purely for absurdity. Beneath the quirky one-liners lies genuine conviction, a man who rejects violence even while operating a weapon of war. That contradiction is intentional and meaningful. The character functions as a walking paradox. He commands a tank, yet preaches positive thinking and peaceful vibes. He participates in combat, but refuses to embrace its logic. That tension isn't resolved or explained away. It simply exists, creating friction that the film never tries to smooth over. Oddball remains committed to his worldview, despite its obvious contradictions. What audiences remember as comic relief actually carries moral weight. Oddball's sincerity challenges the assumption that war requires enthusiasm for destruction. His presence suggests alternative ways of existing within violent systems, not through resistance exactly, but through refusal to adopt the expected mindset. The joke, it turns out, has a point sharper than it first appears. Number 19. Marketed the wrong way. When the film hit theaters, audiences didn't know what they were getting. Marketing materials promised either straight comedy or straightforward war action, depending on which poster or trailer viewers encountered. The actual movie delivered neither cleanly, blending tones in ways promotional campaigns hadn't prepared anyone to expect. That confusion hurt initial reception significantly. Critics struggled to categorize what they'd seen. Some dismissed it as too silly for serious war drama. Others found it too cynical for light entertainment. The hybrid approach that makes the film interesting also made it difficult to sell. Studios wanted clear genres, and this picture refused to cooperate. Mixed messaging led to mixed reviews and underwhelming box office performance. The mismatch between expectation and reality created an unfair first impression. Viewers arriving for one experience received another, and disappointment colored their judgment. What the marketing failed to communicate was that the tonal blend was intentional, not a flaw, but a feature. The film needed time and distance before audiences could appreciate what it was actually attempting. Number 20. Rewatches saved its reputation. First impressions don't always stick, and this movie proves it. Initial theatrical response was lukewarm, but something changed over the following decades. Television broadcasts, home video releases, and word of mouth gradually built an audience that appreciated what original viewers had missed. The film found its people slowly, rather than immediately. Repeat viewings revealed layers that single watches couldn't capture. Jokes landed differently once viewers understood the underlying critique. Character choices made more sense with knowledge of where the story headed. The tonal shifts that confused first-time audiences became strengths for those returning with adjusted expectations. Familiarity transformed confusion into appreciation. Time also provided context that 1970 audiences lacked. As attitudes toward war films evolved, the movie's subversive elements became easier to recognize and value. What once seemed tonally uncertain now appears ahead of its time. The reputation reversal demonstrates how initial reception doesn't determine lasting legacy. Patience and perspective can rewrite the verdict entirely. Number 21. The title tells a lie. Right from the opening credits, the film plays a subtle trick. The word heroes suggests something traditional, brave soldiers serving noble causes through sacrifice and duty. But the characters on screen fit none of those descriptions. They're deserters from conventional heroism, succeeding by abandoning every rule the military establishes for them. The irony cuts deeper on reflection. These men don't fight for country, honor, or comrades. They fight for personal gain. Their victory comes through disobedience, not valor. The title promises one kind of story, while the movie delivers another entirely. That misdirection isn't accidental. It's the filmmakers winking at audiences smart enough to notice the gap. What the title actually does is redefine heroism itself. If these misfits qualify as heroes, then the term means something different than tradition suggests. Perhaps heroism isn't about following orders, but about recognizing when orders deserve to be ignored. The title becomes a question rather than a statement, and the film spends 2 hours suggesting an uncomfortable answer. Kelly's Heroes endures because it refuses to follow the rules, both on-screen and off. What began as a dark war drama transformed into something smarter, shaped by creative tension and unexpected flexibility. Eastwood's frustrations, Sutherland's expanding role, disguised tanks, and anachronistic music, none of it happened by accident. Every strange choice contributed to a film blending comedy with critique, asking uncomfortable questions about authority and what heroism means when the system rewards only those who never risk anything. If this video changed how you see the film, hit like and subscribe for more secrets behind classic movies. Drop a comment sharing which details surprised you most. The character studios feared, the muted ending, or something else entirely.